And today I'm going to basically be talking about a couple of different things. Mostly, as promised, I'm going to be talking about how we can hack our way out of situations where we don't have access to closures. Different ways we can get information from the DOM, from other things that we wouldn't have access to outside of our closure scope normally. That's going to be the main focus of this lecture. I'm also going to be during this time introducing a couple new concepts. I think I will probably introduce you all to the adapter pattern, and also a couple of other refactors and just ways that we can use JavaScript to make our life slightly easier. That cool with everybody? So for a review for what we have now, right? You can tip Taylor Swift, right? You can tip any of the actors. Let's finish that. Horrifying Garfield. And you can delete things, right? So we built that out, right? And the way we did that was in cats.js, we created this closure that had access to basically everything that we needed. Like our tip button, we went ahead and we had access to the cat from beforehand, and we just kept track of cat.tip, right? We updated cat every time we fetched something, or we did like an update. We also like had this remove that was just div.remove because we had built the div inside the same function, right? We all kind of see how that works. Cool. So today, instead, I'm going to imagine that we didn't do any of this. I'm going to instead, let's go ahead, inspect Taylor Swift. And here, cool. So we've got most of this already. I'm going to, I'm just going to actually do this as HTML. I'm going to copy all of this code. Fine. As HTML. I'm going to copy all this. And then what I'm going to do next, so I'm just going to delete everything in here in this render cat function. Boom. Oh, wait, first, better thing to do, git checkout -b. I'm going to create a new branch for doing this with event delegation is really going to be how we approach this. Cool. When I say creating a new branch, do people know what I just did? I did like git checkout -b. Let's see where, there we go. I did git checkout -b event delegation, right? And then eventually I like made an initial commit and I wrote git push -u origin event delegation. Does anyone know what I'm doing there? Yeah, exactly. If we go to my repo now, because I've pushed it up, it'll give me a link, but I will actually have two versions. I'm going to have a main, and then I will have an event delegation. I also have test event delegation because I coded some test stuff before we went here. But so now I have two different versions of my repo, the main one and the event delegation version. Eventually, if I were like doing this as a real app, what this allows me to do is allows me to make a bunch of test changes, create a test version of repo, work on it with other people, right? And when we're finally done, create a pull request that goes ahead and says, hey, I suggest this be the new main branch. Can you merge this into the main branch for me? And you can do that in regular repos. You can do that online if you want to, like, when you're like working on open source projects. Usually when we say I create a pull request and my pull request was accepted to like an open source project, that means that somebody, like some project, has taken my branch of their project and pulled it into the main one. Cool.
What is the checkout syntax? Is that just part of creating a new branch? My git knowledge is.
Yeah. So git checkout -b you have a bunch of branches, right? I have get checkout main, right? If I want to go to a main branch, I can go back with get checkout event delegation. If I want to create a new branch, I would have to just write get checkout dash b cheesy branch. No, wait. Cool branch Doritos. Cool. And now I have on my local machine, cool branch Doritos. If I want to then push this up, I would do get push dash u origin, which basically says like, hey, I want to push this new branch to origin. And the branch I want to push is cool branch Doritos. And now if we go to my web to over here, we can refresh. And we have cool branch Doritos. Cool. So here we're going to be in event delegation. Eventually, when I drop a link to this repo, I'm probably just going to link it to the event delegation branch rather than the main branch, so that you can click both versions. Cool. So here I'm now going to finally destroy all of the work we did last lecture and the previous lecture. Cool, done. I'm going to paste this right here, which was just the HTML I copied. And I'm going to basically work with this. Instead of doing that, I'm going to let's make this a little bit more clear. Cool. Whoops, no. Great. So here, instead of like actually just doing this, I'm going to instead of like creating all my elements, I'm instead going to do like cats list or like document.get element or query selector dot cats list dot inner HTML plus equals and then this bad boy. And here I'm going to just do some string interpolation. Let's get rid of this. Cat.image. Cat.name. Cat.name. Ooh, actually, this is a good time to show you all. I will do this in a second. First, I'm going to do it this the old-fashioned way. Cat.description. Cat.actor. Cat.team name. Cat.actor. I think that should be it. Let's take a look. Cool. So now we're back to having this all rendered. Do we all see what I just did here? I just used inner HTML to append this all to the DOM. Yeah. Anything magical about this? How are you feeling? Thumbs up, thumbs sideways, thumbs down? Cool. So you'll notice right now, I don't have access to anything within the div. Actually, first off, you'll notice that I personally am annoyed by the fact that I have to write the word cat dot like 30 times, right? One tool I do want to show you because this becomes really helpful in React. It would be nice if I could, in one line of code, create a bunch of variables named image, name, description, actor, team name, and tip, right? And pull them all from the cat object, which I can do. The way you do that is you do something called destructuring. And it looks something like this. I'm going to first show you that it works, and then I'm going to explain it. Nice. Yeah, destructuring. That's exactly right. You'll notice it works, right? I didn't get any errors. The cats are still appearing on the DOM. What I'm saying right here is go into this object called cat and create these variables for me from them. So let me actually demonstrate this with a different thing. I'm going to create a new object. Well, there we go. That works. And then I'm going to actually even inside here say, there's a second little object. And then let's go with 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is an annoying little object right here that we can get printed out. Cool. So basically, if I want to create variables for each of these keys, I could be like const Batman equals obj a key of Batman, right? I could do that. I could do that for each of these, right? Eventually for swag, let's just go ahead and be like, swag, let 1 equal obj swag 1, right? So I could do this for all of the variables, right? But JavaScript actually has a syntax, which will allow me to instead say like, hey, I would like to take the object that you just gave me, right? And I want to pull out some variables from it. In this case, I want to pull out Batman, cheese, and then from inside of the object called swag, I want to pull out 1 and 3. Cool. And then it's going to get mad at me because I already declared Batman. I'm going to do this one more time. I'm going to refresh. There you go, like boop, 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 boop. Cool. And now if I call Batman, I get Robin, cheese, I get Gouda, 1, I get 2, 3, I get 4. What I'm doing right here is I'm saying, hey, go into this object, and for each of these words, right, set a variable equal to the key, or set a variable with the name of the key and the value of whatever the value of that key was. This is just a really neat way to write some coding. If you get really annoyed with writing cat dot a bunch of times, this is a really useful thing to do. In React, it becomes really helpful because almost all the time you're calling like this dot state dot something, right? And writing this dot state a bunch of times gets really messy. So it becomes very normal to like have a this dot state at the top of your render function. How many people did I lose with this? What's the weirdest part of it? I think is the big question.
It's familiar to me, and it seems like partials a little bit, like the local partial rendering that you did in Rails that you showed us, in a way.
That's fair. Yeah, we're basically creating new variables from old objects, right? This case, this is a really kind way to do it, right? I'm just saying, hey, grab these variables from cat, right?
You know what? I meant more visually than conceptually. Yeah. Sorry.
No worries. There's like some actual like weird JavaScript syntax magic that goes into being able to write this. There's a lot of crazy stuff you can do with destructuring. This one will bring you most of the way there. Just be like, hey, pull out these keys and make them into variables is kind of what this does. One heads up here. Yeah, go for it.
Nikki, so is it you're passing in the cat object and then telling it what keys to make? Am I understanding that correctly? I just want to make sure I get it.
Yeah, cat is the object that we're passing in. We're saying, hey, all of these variables, pull them out from cat. And this is a weird syntax, right? But really we're defining 6 different constants right here, pulling them from cat. And the weirder version, we can actually even like go nested, right? So in this case, I had a nested object in here, right? And I can do like did this right here. This actually even gets weirder. You could be like, let R equal 1, 2, 3. And you can be like const first item, second item, third item equals R, I think. So you can do this without arrays too. And you can combine these, right? You can do something like, so I could like use swag as an array. I don't want to like get too into this because it's going to get too crazy. The one heads up with doing this, right? If I do like, I can't access the initial, update the initial object with the destructured data. Batman is a string of Robin. It has no idea what the original object is. So I can't go Batman equals Jason Todd, right? It'll be like, hey, first off, this is a constant. Secondly, this is a, this is like, I just know about this as a string. You would actually have to go back to be like obj out of key of Batman equals Jason Todd, right? And then obj will be updated, but if I call Batman, it's still gonna be Robin. So these are just to pull out variables so that you can use them. You can't like, they don't stay connected to the object that you pulled them out from in any way. So that's the one heads up when you play with it. So it's really useful for, say, a render function that's job is to spit out some stuff to HTML. It's less useful for doing stuff like keeping track of a bunch of things that you're going to have to keep changing. Cool. So I'm going to start using this every now and then to remind you that it exists. It becomes really helpful in React. But now we have this working. And if you decide not to use it for your project, that's fine. But at this point, we now have a bunch of cats rendered to the DOM, right? Our buttons don't work. Yeah. And we're stuck in a situation where I can't just directly access this element, right? Now, at this point, basically, one thing that a lot of students are tempted to do is go like, all right, well, then in this case, I need to be like document.query selector all tip buttons dot for each click handle click, right? Oh, man, click is not a function where? Oh, right, elements dot add event listener, this bad boy, right? So what I'm saying here is iterate through all of them or find all the tips and for each of them add an event listener to them. Remember what, does anyone remember what I said about this though?
Was that the bubbling issue?
Yeah, it's anti-pattern because it's really prone to errors. For example, right here. Right now I can tip or whoops. Just gonna double check everything that I did here. Cool. Right, I'm gonna need to do it here. Like it after you render all the cats, do this. Cool. I can call tip T Swift, tip Jennifer Hudson, tip Lori Davidson, and this is working. Like I'm getting this console log, right? And it's not that map is better, right? Map would be helpful for us returning if we need to use that array afterwards, right? If we need to transform an array and do something to it, then map is good. if we're just trying to do something to each thing, or like do something with each thing, each makes sense. The issue here is that you're noticing I'm tipping a bunch of these, right? So I'm at one point selecting all of them and then tipping them. But then let's say I went ahead and I got, let's go ahead and add Old Deuteronomy, Judy Dench. Cool. So another cat. Definitely Angelicals. Cool. Old Deuteronomy, Judy Dench, who was supposed to be in the original production of Cats in the 1980s, but then injured her ankle. And a lot of people were suspicious that it was her trying to bail out of a Broadway production that she was thought was doomed to fail. But it became one of the biggest successes ever. But I still agree with her. Sorry, first off, Dame Judy Dench. I need to give her the right level of respect here. Still agree with her. If I thought that I was going to be in Cats and I wanted to keep my career, I'd probably leave. Here we go. There we go. Nah, this isn't gonna work. I'm just gonna be like old flirts with Ian McKellen. Sir Ian McKellen. There we go. Cool. And you'll notice right here, a couple of things just happened. First off, something broke. I was curious about what broke. Why are you not showing my issues? That's not good. Why are there two consoles and what are you doing? Okay, it actually worked. I'm curious about what this is saying right here. But we submitted this, it popped up, right? And so now, of course, okay, I'm confused here. But now, of course, I can break everything. And this is good, right? Notice my tips aren't console logging, none of them, right? And they were before. But as soon as I submitted Dame Judy Dench, the tips broke. Does anyone know why? And just to show you, when we call handle submit, at the end, we call render cat, and we feed this cat into here, adding them to the inner HTML for cats list.
Is it because we're wiping out all the data and then adding it all back in?
That's exactly right. When we call .innerHTML plus equals on the cats container, right? What we're saying is add this to the HTML and then reparse it as something in like HTML. So all the event listeners we added to these little divs are now broken. They have been replaced because we've made copies of all the elements, right? If I go ahead and I submit some random cat, YOLO, what? Okay. Another image of Judy Dench. You can watch in my elements, right? Let's get rid of this. Cool. You can watch in my elements. As I hit add your cat, all of these light up. It re-renders all of them. It doesn't just add some random cat. Cool. It updates all of them. This is why way early on, I said iterating through a list of items and then adding event listeners to each one is usually an anti-pattern. You have to be really careful if you're doing something like this. Instead, what I suggested when I was talking about event delegation is I said, add the event listener to the closest stable parent. In this case, that's the cats list. The cats list doesn't change when we update its inner HTML. It still stays there, and any event listeners we add to it still stay there. Cool. How are people feeling about this? Thumbs up, thumbs sideways, thumbs down?
So
Yeah.
in this case, like dot target would just be whatever part you clicked on within the cats list.
Yes, exactly. Cool. So at this point, instead of doing this, I'm going to go, hey, cats list dot add event listener, click, handle, click. This is how I'm going to start. Cool. I'm going to say the whole cats list, listen for a click event. And in here, I'm going to console log e.target. Cool. We refresh the page now. Whenever we click, I'm double checking that I did my work here. So we have this cats list that we are ostensibly clicking on. I'm going to console log cheese. Console log that cats list. Ooh, interesting. Did I do something weird?
I've totally lost you.
Yeah. Something broke here. Let's go ahead and do this. Document query selector dot cats list, right? Because I was using outer HTML, which I think broke whatever, like completely overwrite whatever this was. So here I'm going to go ahead and try this again. Now, there we go. We're getting cheese wherever we click. Outer HTML, I have no idea why I did this a while ago, but now I'm stuck with it unless I decide to do this elsewhere. But now we've got this little query selector, and whatever gets added to the DOM, this cats list is going to stay the same. Cool. Once the initial render happens. Unusual error, happy we went through it together. But basically, I don't think that this is a useful little element anymore. Once we call out outer HTML on it. But now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to console log e.target. Cool. Boop, 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 boop. Anything I click inside the section now exists. And if I make a new random, let's go with ooh, Mrs. Norris. Wow. Actor, some cat, team name, teachers. I don't know. Cool. Hall monitor cat. Mrs. Norris. There we go. Heck yeah. Great, there we are. Now you'll notice I can add Mrs. Norris. And Mrs. Norris also has this event on it. You all see that? So adding your event listener to the closest stable parent in cases where you're using inner HTML is really important. Do we all kind of get that? Cool. So at this point, I can go ahead and I can say if e.target.class list.contains .tip or tip, right? Let's console log. Let's tip this cat. Yeah. As in give the cat money. Cool. All right. So here's where it gets interesting, right? Previously, in order to make this happen, eventually we'd have to write like some sort of fetch to API slash cats slash ID. And then we'd have to do like some sort of method catch. And then at this point, I'm getting lazy. Boop, boop. And then we're probably going to be like tip plus 10, right? Unfortunately, we don't have access to an ID and we don't have access to a tip. Yeah. So at this point, I need to start doing things. Let's start with getting the tip. We can always go ahead right here and say, hey, data tip equals cat.tip. And then we'll talk about this in a second, right? Now, if I console log tip e.target.dataset.tip, you will notice something happens. I get tip 60, tip 20, tip 40. I get whichever tip they currently have access to. What I'm doing here is I'm using something called the data set that we talked about a bit last time, right? Basically, for any HTML element, let's go grab this one. Document.query selector h1. If you give it something like data cheese equals steak, yeah, I can then call .dataset on it, and it will take cheese, the data hyphen cheese, and give you the value of steak. So you'll notice data hyphen cheese then gets put into my data set as a key of cheese and the value of whatever we put here. This becomes a great way to store information on the DOM and a really cool way to hack your way around stuff. What I don't want to see people doing is immediately storing all of their items on data sets. Like, be a little bit tasteful with this. That being said, in this case, super helpful, right? So I can also, just through right here, I can go and I can say like data set dot, yeah, we did this before. This is what we did last time. And now next time I select this, you'll notice I actually have this whole object that gives me cheese, steak, favorite color, magenta, favorite Rocky Horror character, magenta. Yeah. And if you go over here, this has also become data hyphen favorite color, data hyphen favorite Rocky Horror character right here. Do y'all see how this is working? the data set is a hash that exists in JavaScript by parsing everything that has data hyphen in front of it as like a key value pair in the HTML attributes, tag attributes. Cool. And you can treat it like a plain old JavaScript object or a hash. You can put stuff in it. You can take stuff out of it. It's not like a plain old JavaScript object in that you can't like store functions in there. You can't store objects in there. I don't think. I've never tried to. I wouldn't recommend it if you found a way to. But you can store things like strings and numbers, and it's a great place to do that. Cool. So here, now I have access to this tip, and I can be like, hey, const tip equals this.
Can we store all kind of data?
You can store strings, you can store numbers. I don't think you can store very big pieces of data. I don't know how big the data set can be. But at a certain point, it would be rude to put like 300 characters in your HTML. I don't know what its limit is, but try to use this for very short bits of data. A number, an ID, something like that. I'm going to show you a way to use, probably by the end of this lecture, if we get to it, where I would think of to like, if I need the whole object, where to store that.
Okay.
But this will go ahead right here, and this will be the first half of what we want to do. Now, at this point, I could go ahead and I could be like, hey, data ID equals cat.id, right? And this would be fine. But my advice right here, if we're trying to find the ID, I already know that I'm definitely going to need the ID to delete the cat too, right? And so rather than putting the data ID on everything I want to use, I'm just going to put it on the parent element. Cool. The cat card, right? Do we all see what I just did there? Now, oops. Now if I inspect Bomblerina right here, if I refresh the page and then inspect Bomblerina div right here, if I save my work, then refresh the page and inspect Bomblerina, you'll notice I have data hyphen ID 20, 24, 21, 25, right? On all of these cards, right? Now, easiest thing I could do right here, console log e.target.parent element. And you'll see that I can be like, boop, this is going to give me this cat card, and I can call like dot dataset.id. So I'm going to be like, hey, go from this target element to its parent element, and then grab its data set, and from that data set, grab its ID. We all following that so far? One thing I will caution you, I tend to not use parent element like this because I don't want some other person to come into my code and be like div class equals buttons. And then they're just doing this for styling, right? And then wrap this in a little div, right? They'll be like, cool, this will allow me to use like a little flex box to like show both of those buttons next to each other rather than one on top of the other. And suddenly they break my whole code, right? Parent element directly navigating up and down the DOM tree is a really brittle way to code. It leads to situations where somebody else decides to like add some HTML, or if you decide to add some HTML, you might end up in a situation where you can't like your code has to be changed. So at this point, I mentioned way earlier on, let's go ahead and select the first tip we can. Document get element. Oh, sorry, query selector. Tip. Just get our first tip button. Yeah. We like const tip button equals this, right? I mentioned early on that there's an alternative to query selector that instead of navigating down the DOM tree, searches up the DOM tree for the nearest parent element that matches something. It's called closest. If I do tip button dot closest dot cat card, right? It's going to go ahead and give me that cat card. Closest is a really good tool for going from a button to its parent card and not having to worry about your HTML changing. Yeah.
This is saying no matter what you've put in, no matter how many divs you've put into your, in this case, and into that cat card, no matter what, it's just going to
Yeah.
go straight up to the top of that container.
Yeah, it's going to keep searching up. It's going to first go here. It's going to be like, hey, are you my daddy? Are you my daddy? And then it's going to be like, yes, this one matches, right? It will never find this one because it's on a different branch of the tree. And yes, it uses CSS selectors exactly the same way that query selector does. Cool. So here, now I'm going to just change this back, right? I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually going to be like, hey, let's be like const cat card equals e dot target dot closest cat card. And then we can go ahead and say const ID equals cat card dot data set dot ID. Yeah. Do y'all believe me that this works? What we're doing here, we're grabbing the cat card, and then from that cat card, we're grabbing the ID. And now we have enough to make our initial patch. And refresh this page, click this. Nothing happens initially, but if I refresh the page, Taylor Swift has $6,010 in tips. Dang it, JavaScript. Let's go ahead and let's go parse int this bad boy. So right here, this was 60. It said, but it was 60 as a string. So when we do 60 plus 10, it of course gives us 6,010, which makes sense. Cool. So instead, what I'm doing right here is I'm saying, hey, turn the 60 into the number 60 so that it adds correctly, and then make this work. Cool. So now, right, we can then be like, dot then response to response.json dot then cat to, now we have to do something. This is hard. Now we have this new cat object that we can console log, right? Our servers is updating our cat and then handing it back to us, right? So we can be like, hey, now Taylor Swift has $6,020. Like she needs more money after producing all those Taylor's versions of other songs rather than producing new songs. The Taylor's versions are so good. But this works. We get a new thing back, right? But now we have to go about re-updating our whole HTML, right? And what I can do, if I want to, is I can go over here. I can go like here and I can be like, okay, fine. Okay, so first off, we're going to be like cat card dot query selector tip dot data set dot tip equals cat dot tip. First, let's update this new tip so that this data keeps working, right? And then we can be like cat card dot, we can be like, hey, let's be like class equals tips tip amount. And we can be like dot query selector tip amount dot inner text equals and we can go make this tip. And we can now say this again, right?
Can we?
Yeah.
Can we add a function to maybe if we tip and then we want to stop the tip or edit or delete or change of our mind? Is there any option or like any function that we can do to do that?
So you're saying like have a confirm button first?
Exactly. Yeah. Like what about
Yeah.
you change your mind and you don't want to do that amount?
Yeah, there's a
Is it
confirm
possible?
function somewhere. I think confirm. Jeez.
Sorry, I
Try
just
this.
that had on mind.
So we can always do something like this is gonna get weird. Um, We'd wrap this whole thing inside of an if statement right here. Do. My brackets are about to kill me. Cool. All right. Now, if I click tip Taylor Swift, I get, are you sure you want to give this actor even more money? And I can click cancel. Or
Oh,
I can click OK.
nice.
Got mad at me for actor somewhere. All right, cat.actor. Cool. So you can test this out. This all works. Tips. Are you sure you want to give this actor even more money? Oop. Cat.tip. Yep. We have to use the new information here. Cool. So now this works. I'm going to get rid of the little the confirm because it's really fun, but I'm not sure I want it right now. But yeah, confirm is like an alert, except it'll give you OK or cancel, and will turn true or false depending on whether you click OK or cancel. So that's how you do that. Cool.
All right, thank you.
But I'm gonna just boop, 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 boop. Great. And we can double check that this works. Just keep playing around. Okay, we are now successfully tipping Jennifer Hudson, as one should. And at this point, right, this was kind of neat, right? This is a clean solution where we just make these selections ourselves. If I didn't want to, right? If I like, for example, if I were to do an update method that suddenly took in a ton of different like pieces of information, one thing that I could do to make my life way easier, I'm going to go abstract this a little bit. I'm going to cut all of this. I'm going to be like function generate cat HTML cat. Oops. Oop. Let's do return. Boop. And here I'm going to like bring this down. We can oop. And now here I can just go ahead and say generate cat HTML cat inside this little thing. Do we all see what I just did here? I didn't change anything. I just pulled this out to a different function. This isn't going to add any features yet, but it works. Just I'm generating this new cat inner HTML where I'm just spitting out the return statement of some extra strings to put inside this HTML. I'm returning a string and I'm interpolating it into another string. And this does all of our children HTML. Make sense? Yes? I'm going to take a second here. Make this a little bit more obvious. How are we feeling? And now, if I want to get really snooty with the whole thing, I'm gonna be like, dot then cat card dot inner HTML equals generates cat HTML with this new cat. Just rewrite the whole inside of the function of the HTML. A little nuts, right?
Can that cause loading issues as far as a really large HTML file to regenerate the HTML?
So right now, like that's not a real cause for our like personal alarm. I'm trying to think of a situation where like if one of the things that this HTML element was rendering was a game or something that I wanted to keep absolutely stable, that would be something that I would want to change, right? In this case, this is a bunch of like instantly re-rendering a portion of your HTML is totally fine. And React kind of operates on that principle. Eventually, like React does some really clever things to only render the parts of the inner HTML that it knows have changed. And I could do those clever things too if I wanted to, but it would be a whole lot of work. And right now, this seems to be working pretty quickly. I wouldn't get like, this is something that I would be very happy with seeing on a code challenge. This wouldn't be something where I'd be like, hey, this is slowing your app down. Your computer can process HTML very, very quickly. And it's kind of something we're already doing every single time we render a cat, right? This inner HTML is getting re-rendered every time this happens. So every cat, it's like loading up some HTML, then it's reloading that HTML, then it's reloading that HTML. We haven't really had a problem with it.
Isn't that why it broke before then?
Not quite. That's why we lost our event listeners that we had appended to it, right? But since this inner HTML, this like inner HTML of this cat doesn't have any event listeners I have to worry about, I can just do this. Yeah.
Kind of.
Cool. But yeah, like the difference is just changing this and this versus changing these lines, which I don't think is that bad. I would never consider this a like something to really desperately optimize, especially because it's so darn useful. Like the moment that we're updating more than just two things, very useful. It means I don't have to like do any selectors again. I can actually like get rid of this tip amount right here. My HTML is cleaner. This is neat. Cool. I just wanted to give you this trick because you will think like there will be a lot of times where you're just like, oh crap, they're asking me to re-render this whole card. I'm gonna have to like do like 20 minutes worth of selector work, or you can just do this instead. Cool. Great. Now I'm going to just continue on. I'm going to be like, hey, else if e.target.class list.contains delete. Then, well, we're going to need an ID because what we're eventually going to do, right, is a fetch API /cats/ID with a method of delete. Yeah. That then res to res.json dot then message to, I don't know. We're probably going to need to like delete some sort of cat card. right? And that would kind of be our delete method here. Now, in this case, since we have all this work up here, I don't want to reuse that work. So I'm just going to move this outside the if statement so I can use it in both cases. Cool. You may get a bug if we click outside of something. Let's double check. Yeah, we do get this, right? We could be like, could wrap this in an if statement. If e.target.class list that contains class for a cat button. Then do the rest of this if we want to like make really sure that we're not printing errors out into our console. Oops. I'm using a Windows keyboard on a Mac, and this is what happens. So I can just do this, right? I can be like, hey, fetch to the API at a key of ID, which we're still getting from the data set of the cat card, which is still the closest right here. And then remove the cat card. So this is our whole delete functionality. Just reuse this code right here. Yeah. Anything strike people as gross or off about this? I know I did the delete really quickly, but it's the same pattern. So use this cat card, get the ID, and then remove that cat card. Cool. We can test if this works. First, I can click now and it doesn't get mad at me. I can delete some random cat and then it's gone. I can refresh the page and that cat is still deleted. Yeah. Naomi, what's up?
So on line 57, you deleted that message variable. Is it because we're calling out a method?
It's because we didn't need it, right? Like whatever they sent back, I was just going to delete it. So I just like went ahead and be like, hey, I don't need this variable. So I'm just going to be like, hey, here's a function that takes in no arguments and then removes my cat. Maybe I would want to add that, especially if I wanted validations for that deletion, right? Or if I wanted to like be prepared for there to be an error. In this case, I can't really imagine a situation where this would error out unless this was being rendered on 2 different pages at once. And then like someone deleted it before I did, in which case I think this would still work. Let's double check. We might get a little here in the back end. Let's go ahead and let's delete Skimble Shanks from Rails backend. I don't want to delete Skimble Shanks. Let's delete Skimble Shanks. I'm sorry, Skimble Shanks. Cat.find by name. Did I actually write Skimble Shanks the railway cat? No, I just write Skimble Shanks. Thank God. Cool. Dot destroy. Cool. I'm going to exit out, restart my Rails server. And now, without refreshing the page, I'm going to try to delete Skimble Shanks. And he deletes by get this 404 on the back end. So he still gets removed from the front end, regardless of the message. But it'll be like, hey, I did not find Skimble Shanks in the back end. But then I'll just go ahead and remove it anyways. Cool. If I wanted to like really keep my console clean, I could change that error. But I don't care too much right now. We're coding to pass, and then we'll make that work in retrospect. Cool. So this right here, we're back to functionality. We're back to it working, right? And we used a lot of the data set and like just navigating the DOM tree using closest to make things work for us. Cool. Right now, this is pretty gross. This is some gross code. And I want to show you all something that's a little bit new, a little bit different, a little bit new, but it's a pattern that we're going to change up a little bit when we get to object orientation. But that's totally fine to do without object orientation if you want to. And this is called the adapter pattern. And the goal here will be to make a lot of our fetch work less gross. Cool. So I'm going to do really quickly before I do anything else, I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to create a new adapter.js file. I can just load this in. And how the adapter pattern works is pretty simple. What we do is we create some sort of object, whether it's an instance of a class, a singleton class that has static methods, or a plain old JavaScript object. But we define it and we make it do the first two steps of our fetch for us. There's some people will use make it do the whole fetch and the response. I really like to separate this out as my job is just to make a request and then get a response back. The way we do it is something like this. I'm going to go ahead and create a object, right? I'm going to go ahead and copy this API over. I'm going to actually cut it. Nothing's going to break because API, this is going to run before my index.js, right? And here, I now have like this fetch cats, right? I'm going to instead do this. Get all cats. And I'm going to make this object key equal to a function. You can even be like function. That returns the first two steps of the fetch. It returns the promise from this promise chain, really. And now all I need to do is instead of calling this whole thing, I can be like adapter.get all cats then render cats. And you notice we still get the cats, right? This is maybe a little bit much to show all at once. I could have done this like this, right? I could be like, hey, function, get all cats. And then here I could call get all cats like this, right? And this still works. I'm just making a function that does the first two steps of the then for me, of the fetch for me. And you'll notice the big thing right here, have a return statement before the whole fetch. You don't want to do like return dot then. That's not going to work, right? You want to return this whole set of things. And this is something that I tried to do a bunch as a student. Nobody showed me how to do. And I was like, but how do I abstract portions of my fetch? This is how you do it. Put the return right here. Cool. And what I did really quickly is I just went ahead and I set this into an object so that I don't have a bunch of just random functions defined on the global scope, but instead have one object that's job is to keep track of all my fetches, do all my fetches for me. Cool. So I'm going to change this adapter.get all cats. Yeah.
On the adapter page, you made a hash. You made an object, not a function.
Yes.
Right?
It's an
All right.
object that has a function as one of its values, right?
All
And then right here, we can keep going with this. I can go ahead and say, hey, now I have a thing I can be like tip cat, right? And we can go like, hey, tip cat function. And then interestingly with tip cat, right? We actually need to get both an ID and a tip in here, right? I'm going to change this to ID and new tip right here because I just feel like it shouldn't be the job of the fetch to like do the math for us of updating the tip. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to cut this. I'm going to be like, loop, return this, use new tip right here. But here I can go ahead and I can say like, hey, where were we? Adapter dot tip cat. We take an argument of ID and a new tip. So we've got the ID. And then we go tip plus 10. But then do this. And now that's way cleaner. Yeah. Naomi, what's up?
So we pretty much, it's kind of like I wouldn't say a partial,
Yeah.
but it's kind of like that.
Yeah, partials come from a big urge as a coder to be like, hey, want to be able to reuse this code and I want it to not be gross and all over my other code. And those two things are solved with partials in that case. But a partial is really just like a Rails abstraction for a method that would print out some HTML for us, right? We wrote it with a very different syntax. We were like, hey, we need to write it as an ERB file and we need to use the word render. But really what it was just a method that printed that stuff out for us, right? In this case, we're creating a little function that does part of our function for us. Yeah.
So are you saying then that the adapter pattern can be used with things other than fetch requests? It's to abstract anything?
Yeah. Yeah, like usually when I'm using like the term adapter, or some people call this like an API service class or an API service object. Like, yeah, you can do this for a bunch of things. One really common thing I use it for, like this idea of like having this object that holds a bunch of functions. I use it for games. For example, like I have to at a certain point ask JavaScript, hey, which keys are pressed down right now? And I'd be holding that in a hash, right? And then I'd be like, for each key that is held down, run their specific function that's also in that. I should be saying object in JavaScript. Don't use hash when you're talking about JavaScript objects. I know I do that all the time. But hash is a Ruby term. In JavaScript, we call it an object or a pojo. But yeah, I think I actually have a blog on it. It's Mickey Dover controller, JavaScript. Let's see. Nope. Not sure I have this somewhere. Medium. There we go. I ended up having this like little hash right here that has a bunch of functions, right? That then what I do is I would iterate through this hash each time. And anytime that I found something with the key of that pressed equal to true, I'd run that function. And this was to build Pong. So yeah, this is a really common thing of being like, hey, I want to store a bunch of different functions inside an object. And JavaScript will allow you to do it. Cool.
Got it. Thank you.
Cool. And then we can be
On
like,
line 42,
yeah,
sorry.
go ahead.
On line 42, you've got the adapter.tipcat. So in the adapter file, you have a method.
Yeah, let's pull
or
these
a
up together because I feel like that'll make things easier.
Oh, all right. Okay.
Yeah, it was up to me to say like, hey, I kind of want a new tip here, right? You could pass in a whole cat object if you wanted to, and I could make this whole thing just called update cat. I could be like cat data, and then I could just be like cat data. And then here I can be like tip plus 10. And this would allow me to use a more, like I could use this update cat in other places if I decide to like build an update feature, right? Might be helpful. In this case, I didn't. Cool. I keep doing this real quick. Delete cat function ID. Gross. Gonna do this for one last cat. Create cat function cat. And this one right here. Oh no. Let's try this. Okay. There we go. I have a clipboard manager. I had accidentally copied something wrong, so then I went back to my previous copy, and there we go. And I'm going to just change this to cat. Cool. So we can double check that all this works, right? I can be like, I'm going to go create Christopher Jones, yeah. Oh, Tom from Tom and Jerry, sure. Tom the cat team. We'll make him a jellicle. Hates Jerry. Tom from Tom. Now we can do Tom Holland. There we go. Cool. Go add our cat right here. You can tip Tom Holland, right? You can vanish Tom Holland. So this all works. And this adapter pattern makes sense. Yeah. A couple of other things that you might find yourself coding. Try and think of a way that wouldn't require us to do something really crazy in 15 minutes. But there are two other tools that I think might be helpful for you to think about, right? One is right here. You're in a situation where you have a bunch of ID objects right here. Yeah, do you want me to try to make an update method in like 14 minutes that autofills this form when we click update, and then we'll either update that cat for us or do something else? Or do you want me to just like show you a couple of the abstractions I would use to make that happen? Nico, what's up?
I was looking at one of the labs and they were doing the callback method. Is that something you could apply?
So where we pass
know
in a
if
callback?
Yeah.
We've done that in a few places. I'm not sure exactly what we're referring to with that specific callback, but I'm sure that like we've done a lot of creating abstractions and like having callbacks and stuff like that. But I think I would need to know very specifically what they were referring to there.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to try to make this edit feature work. I want to reuse this form to instead say, like, if I click a button right here, I want it to like go like edit Bomblerina and then have us be able to fill that form out. Cool. This is going to be pretty challenging. This is going to be pretty quick, and I'm going to apologize if I lose something along the way. But here, I'm going to start by going like this. Boop. Update. We're going to start here. Edit Bomblerina. I don't have a CSS for it. That's fine. And here, I'm going to now say else if e.target.class list.contains update. Console log. Let's update this cat. Yeah. So this works. Now, unfortunately, inside this function right here, we have no information about that cat, right? And we're not going to store it all in a data set on the DOM. But we can always do this. We can always be like const cats equals this, right? Every time we render a cat, we can be like cats.push cat. Yeah. I'm going to show you what I just did right there. I now have a array of cats that just is all of the JSON data we got back from the server initially. I just saved it. Cool. Now what I can do, so I can create a little function that I'm going to call function find cat by ID. Let's just call it find cat. It's going to take in an ID. I'm going to go ahead and say cat or cats find cat cat.id. I'm going to return this. Sorry, the urge to make this an arrow function that exists on one line is too fun. It's too much. Because it's such a neat little method. Yeah. Now if I go ahead and I go refresh, I can find out all of the data that we have about Bumble Arena using this method. Do you all see that? So what I did here was I just pushed all of the data that we got back into an array so that we could use it later. Yeah. And then I create a little abstraction method that goes ahead and says like, hey, take an ID and find that cat, right? And now we can go ahead and we can start doing stuff with this. And first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to give the form.dataset.id equals cat equals ID. Yeah. Just so that the form will know which cat it's supposed to be dealing with here. And now I'm going to change my handle submit function to be like if cat, if, we can go right here. If form.dataset. Oh, do we actually have? I'm going to have to go right here. Document.get.query selector form.dataset.id. If form.dataset.id, if you have an ID in your dataset, console log, I am now a form that does updates. Else, ooh, I actually want all of the stuff still. I'm just gonna go ahead and we're gonna be like, so I'm saying here is, hey, if this form has a data set, then we're going to be doing something different. If it has data set ID, we're going to be doing something different. Otherwise, you can go ahead and do the same thing. What we'll eventually be doing is probably like adapter.update cat, then update cat on the DOM, right? And here, I can now go, cool. Let's actually like make this form into something that we can grab all the time. Const form equals document.query selector form. And now I can do something pretty goofy, right? I can be like const cat equals find cat ID. Yeah. And I can go into my form and I can say, hey, form. We have over here form.name.value equals cat.name. Form.actor.value equals cat.value. Form dot team name equals cat dot team name. Wait, dot value. And then we're going to do form dot scroll into view, which is a method that every element has. Fun, right? I'm going to show you what happens. I click edit Grisabella. Then it's going to pop up with my form. Give me an undefined actor. Cat.actor, right? But you'll notice what I've done so far. So I have this edit this cat will now fill out this form for me with the previous information about the cat. The way I did this was a bunch of different steps. First, I grabbed the cat from the ID using the subtraction method we had. We were able to do this because I had this array of cats, right? And then I just filled out the values from that form with the information we already have about this cat. And then I made the form scroll into view. How many people did I lose? And what's the most confusing part?
I'm still lost on 40. Like, what is happening in that last parentheses there?
Oh, yeah, fine.
Like, I understand it. I've just never seen it written like that, and that's throwing me a bit.
Oh, yeah. So this is kind of the same thing as writing, and we can go ahead and we can write. And it's the same thing, right? This is just this syntax. The arrow function syntax does a couple of things for us. One that we'll learn next week. It binds this to a very specific thing. But other than that, it's just a really neat way to write a function. What I'm really doing is I'm saying, hey, this constant is an anonymous function. And since it's one line, I don't even need a return statement here. But this is
I understand like the arrow function. It's that last parentheses, like after cats find what is happening there. Like,
so
you're taking the cat that you find is, I thought the arrow function is like, now go ahead and turn it into that.
Yeah, no, the arrow function right here says when you pass it into dot find, what you're saying is, hey, go through each cat and return whichever cat has a truthy value for whatever you put in here. So if I go ahead,
that's pulling off the ID that you've entered into the function.
Yeah. So cats that first, or yeah. Like we can take a look right there and we can be like, hey, are you equal to 20? Right? That'll be like true, right? So find is really helpful for that.
Hey, Nikki, can you maybe explain, so I noticed that you use the double equal sign there instead of the strict equality operator. I'm a little bit confused as to how we know when to use the triple equal versus the double equal.
So the triple equal is usually preferred. In this case, I did not know whether my ID would be a string or a number. So notice that in this case, this is true. This is false because cats 0.id is actually a number. If I want it to like try to string to coerce it into a different data type and then check equality, I want to use double equals right here. I could solve the issue, right, by like passing in by doing like a parse int right here. And that'll do the same thing where I go ahead and I'm like, hey, first make this an integer and then compare it, right? But if I wanted to be really lazy about it, I could be like, hey, as long as it's the same number-ish, I could use the double equals. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Cool.
I think I got you. Thank you.
Great. In terms of this, what I lose people on. I just filled out this form with JavaScript. made it scroll into view.
What does scroll into view do? It just puts it up. Or-
Yeah, document, query, selector, h1, scroll into view. It brings you to, it scrolls till it finds the query you want. So it makes it so that the user sees it. So if I click right here, I want to be able to just hop up right to this form. Yeah.
I got it. All right.
So here am I actually going to be like document, query, selector, h1, inner text equals. Yeah, scroll into view is an element that or is a method, a function that every HTML element in JavaScript has. Cool. I'm going to do this really quickly. Now, if I click here, we get edit Grisabella and then this form. Yeah. So now I have this if statement that says, hey, if I have a data set ID, I want to do something different. In this case, I kind of want to do like adapter.update cat, new cat with an ID, right? And here I'm going to go in update cat function ID cat. And here I'm going to go ahead and say, let's copy all of this. Or actually, I'm just going to go ahead and copy all of this because this is already basically what we want. I make a fetch to this ID, method of patch, and right here, I'm just going to pass in cat. Any information that gets sent in will be updated. Cool. So all of the stuff that's from this form that we already have set up, right? Like our form is already creating this cat for us. I might call this something other than new cat, right? Because now it's a bunch of other things, but this will now work, I think. Let's test it out. Edit Bomblerina. You can be like Tay. Nice. Cool. Test this. This is now Tay. It's changed. Cool. Dot then. And at this point, we have to do a little bit more work, right? Be like, we get this cat, and we have to eventually do something else. We have to find the right div and then change its inner HTML. Finding the right div is a little annoying, right? Right now, we do have this data ID, which we can use to actually select something. If I select by attribute CSS, it will get like there's actually ways to specify, hey, I want to select an attribute with with like this sort of weird stuff. So I can go ahead and I'm just going to show you what this looks like. A query selector. I can go ahead and I can say, hey, data ID equals 20. I think this should work. Oh, right. I think 20 has to be a string. There we go. So you can select from the data set. That's totally fine. Query selector will let you. The way that you do it, right? This is the attribute data ID, the value in a string is whichever value you want it to be. So in my case, it's going to be 20. Did I lose everyone there?
So you're
Kind
just
of.
saying that you don't, sorry.
Yeah,
Go
go for
ahead.
it.
No, I just wanted to make sure that I'm understanding this correctly. You don't have to go like to that specific div first. You just go straight to that like nested data ID, like you can just call it without calling what it's inside of?
Yeah, so the data ID is on this div, and you can select an element by other things besides just an ID, a class, or a tag. In this case, I'm selecting it by the attribute of data ID equal to 20.
Okay, got it.
You can also use this to do a bunch of other things. You can be like, hey, if you want to like add a different attribute to this, you can search by that. And there's nothing wrong with it. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to be like, I'm going to create a new const find cat div equals ID to document query selector. I'm just going to copy this bad boy. And here I'm instead going to use an ID here. Yeah. Try this. Find cat div 20. And this will give me Bombarina. I want Grisabella's. That's 24. Yeah. So now I believe all I have to do is be like, find cat div cat.id. This should return the actual div. Then I can go .inner HTML equals. Then we have this generate cat HTML cat from earlier, which is right over here. So take the cat, spit out this HTML, rewrite the inner HTML from with this update. Do Tay Swift. Add your cat. Whoa. That is fascinating. Did I do plus equals? No, I did equals. What happened here? Why is this inside the form? What did I do? Oh God. I'm just gonna go ahead and console log find. See like const cat div equals find cat div cat ID. Let's console log what that was. Because what the heck? Cool. Edit Bombarina. Tay again. Okay, so that happened again. And weirdly, I'm getting the. Oh, I'm a fool. The form also has a data ID of 20. I'm selecting the form with the data ID of 20. Great. I'm going to actually just very quickly change that. I'm going to be like, hey, when we click edit, I want to set the forms dataset.cat ID equal to ID. And I'm going to then say if form.dataset.cat ID, then make this work. Cool. Edit Bombarina. Tay Swift. Uh-oh. Right. And then I need to change this to cat ID also. Now this works. Naomi, what's up?
Okay, that was kind of weird case. Can
Yeah.
you explain like what happens?
Absolutely. So what happened was my form, right? I initially made my form also have a cat ID equal to whichever cat we were trying to edit, right? So it'd be like cat ID is 20, which was bad because that was also how I would select Bomb Ballerina. It had a data ID of 20, right? So instead, I just changed the form to have a different data type that was called cat ID versus just ID. So that this method right here wouldn't find it accidentally. Because query selector always selects the first element that matches. And if I gave the form a data ID equal to 20, and I also gave Bomb Ballerina a data ID equal to 20, it's going to find the form rather than the data ID. So what was happening was I was replacing my form with, where are we going here? I was replacing my form with the inner HTML from the cat, which isn't good. It's not what you want.
Is that why the image was super big?
Yeah, because it didn't have any of my styling about
Oh,
like,
okay.
hey, we're now inside of a card. Cool. I'm going to then create a function that I'm going to call like reset form. Function reset form. Go ahead and say form, reset form data set ID. Can I clear that like that? I'm going to double check something. Copy. All right, let's give form data set ID cat ID. I do dot clear. The clear item from dataset JS. Okay, form that remove attribute data cat ID. That'll work. Form data set now is empty. Cool. Copy this. Form. And then I am going to document query selector h1 inner text equals, it was like add new cat, add a new cat. So what I'm doing right here is I'm making it so that the form goes back to being able to create a new cat when we finish, right? We can go back to Tay. Cool. Now if I do cheese, whatever, YOLO, hi, this works. This goes back to working. And I might even change the submit button, right? But I just give this a little name, right? Where I go. So first thing, I'm gonna be like form, let's submit that value equals edit. Got that name. Nice. Now we get edit Bomb Ballerina. And then back here, I'm gonna be like form submit that value equals add a new cat. Something like that, right? It's add your cat. So this is a little wild. This is a challenging little thing to do. I also think you can do, but like this went ahead and worked. What we did was we stored all of the data about the cats in the array, right? When you hit the edit this cat button, right? Then our handle click would go ahead and pass that that ID into the form as in the data set, would find the cat, fill out the form with all the data about that value, right? And then it would change all this for us. I think there's one update I still need to do to like change the bug. And if I had made this Tay Swift, right? I do edit Bombalurina. Now if I do edit, I still have Tay up here. So I actually do need to do like in our little update method, I have to go ahead and say find cat.id. That and this should return. I just want to double check that this works, right? If I do find cat, yes. Find cat 20 is going to return an object. I will have to eventually update this array to make this work, which is going to be an annoying little thing. Cats index of index that. Boo, I'm gonna have to think about how I would write this. It's not that interesting. It's just being like, hey, change this array so that just this thing is different. You can go ahead and do this. Trying to think off the top of my head how to do that. But right now, if you're bored, you can totally leave. This is just gonna be some array method stuff. Update object in array JavaScript. Nice. This is boring, and I don't want to use that one. Find index. There we go. Nice. And then we have this, oops. splice. Replaces one element in index 4. There we go. So it could be like cats.splice, cats.find index. This is gross. 1. And then where was I? And then the new cat, right? I think this will work. Let's go with old cat. Old cat.id. Let's try this out. Edit bump arena. Tay-Tay. Edit. Edit. Now it's Tay-Tay. Yay, there we go. Cool. Changing the source of truth. What I did right here, right? I said, hey, go into the old cats array, right? Find the index of the cat we need to change. Pass that into my splice method. Delete the cat there. And then replace it with this, which is something you can do with splice. This is probably not the only way to do this. And I definitely...
There was a lab. I saw a lab with the splice method. Did anyone else see it? Anyone else do that lab yet? No? Okay. But there was something that directly did what you just did. So it's pretty cool.
Cool. Well, I'm glad that someone else has seen this elsewhere. Naomi, what's up?
I know this is like totally off topic, but how can you like keep track with which method is which? You know how like in Rails it was like def index or everything was kind of like separated. Like in JavaScript, it's kind of like a blob.
It's a complete mess. That's what we're going to be talking about next week.
Oh, okay.
Object orientation is going to make this way friendlier. Yeah, right now this is a mess. And there's like, I haven't really done any code organization at all at this point. I'm
looking for, I'm sorry.
You go ahead. No.
I was saying, I'm looking for like the analogy, like the MVC pattern. Like I'm just trying to find a pattern here, but I can't seem to. And I hope others can one, so they could tell me like what starts when, you know, the ordering of something. Like, I don't know. You guys know what I'm talking about?
That's what we're going to get into a lot next week with object orientation is how to pattern this in a way that makes sense. And that's going to be the big problem that React solves. There's a reason why everyone codes in React and not vanilla JavaScript, and it's because React is really opinionated about how you organize your JavaScript, and it does a lot for you if you do that. Basically, the way React works, if you want like a very brief overview, right?
Sure,
you turn every element into this thing that has its own state, right? That's like basically what describes what's in it. So let me see if I can pull this up. This may be a time to pause recording. Not, I think, especially now, people who see this will be like, I don't want to miss that, right? So they imagine like there's a sporting goods and electronics array right here, right? That each have some data about them, right? So their idea, right, is that each of these should be instances of a class called like product row, right? And its job is to keep track of the fact that it is football and it's $49.99, right? So what React kind of does is for each, like you create a class called product row, and each of these will become instances of a product row, right? And then what you need to do to update that, like if you want, like what React will do for you is if you go like, hey, when I click on football, I want the number to increase by 10. All you have to do is update the number in states and it will automatically re-render it for you. So React will based on the object that's imagining it's in something called the virtual DOM, it will then update the DOM based on like that data that you keep taking in. For now, we have to do that manually ourselves. But because React is like, hey, if you make everything a class and everything an instance of a class that behaves in a certain way, I will re-render all of your code for you without having you ask me to do it, without doing like inner HTML or without like manually updating the DOM in any way. It makes it a really convenient design pattern. So React will fully solve this problem. I'm going to show you a little bit how we conceptualize organizing code when we have to do it in vanilla JavaScript, so that it doesn't feel like a huge blob. And that's going to be the focus of next week. Cool. Naomi, what's up? Okay, that was probably the old raised hand. All right, I'm gonna let you all go. I know that we're 30 minutes over. Thanks for your patience. Have fun.